أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وقنا عذاب النار. Last class we stopped off talking about the things are the actions that were haram, and we mentioned 7 of them are actually 9 of them. Yani we said وَيَحْرُمُ عَلَيْهِ, yani it's haram on him al-kadhib, stealing, wal-ghiba, backbiting, wal-namima, in order to convey news, in order to seek uh, fitna, or type of enemy between two people, wal-kibr, and pride, all the way until we came up to al-bughdu. And we said al-bughdu is to be angry at somebody for the ni'mah that Allah has given them, and to be angry because they're still because they feel that they're in a position and that they deserve more and they should be in a higher state. And now we go on to mention the next matter, which is the 10th matter. Al-bughdu was the 9th, according to the things that are considered haram. وَيَحْرُمُ عَلَيْهِ, after that, starting with al-kadhib, was the 1st, and then al-bughdu was the 9th. And the 10th, ar-ru'yatul fadli ala al-ghayri. Ar-ru'yatul fadli, yani al-fadli, yani is yani from the fadl Allah. Or, for example, Allah gave some people the fadl of being intelligent, so it's easy for them to learn things quickly. Some people were given the fadl from Allah to do good business, so they were able to become wealthy, and so on and so forth. Which we can basically say the fadl, the talents, are the blessings, are the good things that Allah has granted a human being. So when we say ar-ru'yatul fadli ala al-ghayri, on somebody else, for example, a person who we would say tries to show somebody up, for example, a scholar, for example, who has some ilm and always says, oh, this person, the other person is ignorant, and he's nothing, he has no ilm, he doesn't have no proper knowledge of hadith, and so on and so forth. He mentioning it in order that people will consider him knowledgeable. Yani this is what we mean by ru'yatul fadli ala ghayri. Yani using your recognizing your talents and using them to show up on, to show yourself up over a person, right? Or for example, as you mentioned, a person who's well talented, very talented in things such as business, and for example he says, this guy doesn't know how to do business properly. He should have came to me, and I would have showed him how to get his business starting off, but because he didn't deal with me, he's broke now. So this is what we call ar-ru'yatul fadli ala ghayri, which is a type of ihana that we mentioned, as we mentioned before, a type of trying to shame a person, and by shaming that person, your level and your status amongst the people go up. So this is called ru'yatul fadli ala ghayri, and this is haram. Why? Because it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who granted you only, it's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who granted you that blessing, and you always must remember that the human being has no power except by what Allah has granted him. So sometimes we have to be careful when we get some forms of knowledge, that we try our best to speak the truth and not to become people who don't know where to draw their limits. For example, we get some knowledge, we respect the scholars because we took it from the scholars. We took it from the books of the scholars and we learned it through transmission. We didn't come up with anything new. So we are simply followers. So we always have to remember that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has granted us the ni'mah and the blessings that we have, so we must not put people down in order to show people that our status is higher. And that's the meaning of رؤية الفضل على غيره. And then he says والهمز واللمز, and الhamzu واللمز between the scholars have different meanings, and because there's different meanings according to the Arabic language and then according to the Sharia what they consider. But one of the meanings of these one of the meanings or definitions of these words is al-hamzu is to mention a person's shortcomings when he's present, and wal-lamzu means to mention a person's shortcomings when they're not present. So al-hamzu means to mention a person's shortcomings while they're present, and al-lamzu is to mention a person's shortcomings when they're not there, which in a sense is a form of the second one is a form of backbiting. Wal-lamzu wal-hamzu, you do it when the person's there, and people who do that intentionally is just outright ignorance. And one of the things we have to look out for is, even though we're close brothers and friends, we tend to do it and joke about it and think that it's okay because of the fact that we're friends, and he'll understand that I didn't mean to hit him. I didn't mean to hurt his feelings, or I didn't intend to hurt his feelings by it. So, and generally on both ends, between two friends, they always, it becomes a habit. But what this does is not exactly the case of the fact that hurting another brother's feelings, which obviously is one of the matters to concern, but it's because people who keep up with this type of attitude and these type of practices will lose a lot of manners, and they won't be very mannersome, and they won't watch what they say with their tongue. People who are loose with this type of play usually intend to indulge in it all the time and become people who are always sarcastic and not realistic people. So these are some of the side effects that people are unaware of when they're always used to mentioning people's weaknesses. Well, that's between two friends, but there's sometimes when, for example, students of knowledge are sitting in a circle and one brother can't read Arabic very well. And, after the lesson, you go back and you say, SubhanAllah, brother says, how was the lesson? You said, MashaAllah, was good, but, Abdullah, he can't read Arabic very good. He keeps slowing up the class. He should shapen up his Arabic before he comes to the class, because, everybody else there, and, we speak Arabic just well, and he reads the text so slow. This is what we considered al-hamzu, because you're mentioning a defect or a shortcoming in a person. This is what we consider al-lamzu, because this is when the person's not there. And an example when the person's there, which usually happens commonly, a person says, I heard from a sheikh, this was the opinion, so this is the opinion that I follow. And the person says, well, what do I heard it was this. And then they start debating. The brother says, what do you know? How do you know that's true? You can't even read Arabic. You can't even read Quran. So why are you talking? This is a form of hamzu, al-hamzu, and this is a form as this is an action, as Al-Akhdari mentions here, as haram. And from all of the lessons that we've taken so far, what we'll just come to understand is that it is necessary for a Muslim to try to speak positively or don't speak at all. And it's a very difficult practice, but if one can control it, then one will have obtained something very good. So inshallah we should always review this small chapter in this book. Although it's small and it looks simple, practicing it is very, very difficult. So that is Al-Hamzu wal-Lamzu wal-Abathu. Al-Abathu means vain play or vain amusement. And these are such things as playing board games or playing sports excessively. For example, people, I mean, look at the NBA and soccer. I mean, in England and around these countries, people go crazy over soccer. I mean, it's unfortunately the Muslims here. I mean, when there's an Egyptian cup or there's an African cup, these people are sitting outside in the streets with televisions at these little convenience stores all over the streets. You see them sit, every time, when somebody scores, because you hear the whole of Egypt from your house going wild for like 1 second. Maybe a goalie will make a good save and you hear everybody roar for a quick second. And people, make this priority to know, who won the soccer game. And this is the meaning of al-abath, because the Muslim is supposed to be a person who's productive in this world, not to sit back and indulge excessively in things that are not excessively in things that are not beneficial. For example, this is why people should not buy for their children these games such as PlayStation and these from what I was told, some new system called Wii. All these fast electronical systems that cause children to be so active and out of control. I mean, the games in these days have a lot of graphic which give kids realistic ideas. And all the kids, they love these new shooting army games. Why? Because they're so realistic. And so this is what we call wal-abath, which is vain play, which any type of play that doesn't bring any form of benefit. So even in terms of sports, a Muslim should not indulge in it excessively. For example, playing on soccer teams and hockey teams 4 days a week, when he could be learning something about his religion. Understand that the non-believers do their deen the best way they can. For example, people who love sports, they are going to be there at their fields 24/7, and they make it a priority to at least play some basketball in a day and shoot some hoops or play some hockey or play some soccer. They make it a priority. People who like music, they make it a priority to at least to make sure that as soon as that new album comes out, to go to the stores and buy it. They'll be the first in line to buy it, and they'll listen to it over and over and over again until they basically memorize the lyrics. So the Muslim's priority should be to learn and to give a service to the people and fellow Muslims. Our job is to try to become better people, and so we should be doing what we're supposed to do better than what they're doing, because they do what they're supposed to do, and we should be doing what we're supposed to do. For example, you have these young 17-year-olds now, 18-year-olds now, wear their pants down to their knees, with their hats on sideways, and music blasting down the street, and nobody can basically stand them because they got a lot of problem, but they stand proud. They're actually practicing their sunnah, and they don't care if the whole world, they can be on a street corner hanging, smoking and drinking, and the whole world can walk past them and give them dirty looks, and they'll be like, yeah, and what, and why are you looking at me? So they practice their sunnah and they stick to it. The Muslims, we have to learn to have that same type of attitude because we know that we have the truth. We practice our religion and we be very firm about our practice, and we stick to our sunnah. So if it means being different, then we have to get used to it because practicing the religion is the way, practicing the deen of Islam is the way to paradise and the way to living a sound life and a peaceful life in this world. Inshallah, may Allah give us tawfiq. After that, we mention as-sukhriyatu. Was-sukhriya means to put people down and to make and to make them low. For example, to mock people. And we mentioned earlier in the book what intiharul muslim wa ihanatihi. Yani that is sukhriya in itself. Yani to scorn somebody. More like we should say, and it's like what ihanatihi. Ihana meaning to shame somebody, as sukhriya. And this is common, I would say. I witness in the Middle East a lot. And for example, doormen we call them bawabs, and they usually live at the bottom of every building, and they usually cook for they cook for their landlords, and they do wash the landlord's car. They do all the types of services for the landlords. So when their landlords get angry with them, they speak to them in a way that entails a sukhriya. They'll say, for example, you uneducated people can't do nothing right, or maybe they do something and they'll say, what should I have expected from a doorman like you? I should have known better not to get you to do something like that because you don't know no better, and this is what we call a sukhriya. Another example of that is when a person becomes Muslim, and you start deciding to wear thobe, and or a sister starts wearing the hijab, and then all of her old friends are laughing at them, like they say, "Oh man, why are you wearing a dress for? You're a man, you're wearing a dress, right?" Or for the women who cover their faces and wear niqab, they'll say, "Oh, you look like a ninja." A'udhu billah. This is a type of sukhriya because they want to make a mockery of you. They want to make you feel low, right? So this is the meaning of sukhriya, which is a form of shaming somebody and trying to make them low. Then he goes on, rahimahullah, to mention az-zina, which we translate as fornication, which is illegal intercourse, which according to the Sharia is sometimes punishable by receiving 100 whips, 100 lashes, and sometimes it's punishable by death. And for each one of them are their individual rules. And in our countries, in the Western country, they can't understand why Islam views fornication as such a grievous act when in their culture it's something normal and actually something expected. And what they don't really realize is, even if they were to go back maybe 50 or 60 years, or maybe not even 20 to 30 years or 40, even amongst their culture from Christianity, fornication was considered something grievous, and it's only modern times which have made this action, this grievous act and ugly act, something normal amongst the youth. And the reason for that generally is because of the amount of shahwa, vain desires that come from music and a lot of movies. So the shahwa of the young people is very high, and the role models now are people who are generally immoral and paint the picture that fornication is something bliss. For example, this type of music that we have now always talks about fornication as something more preferable than marriage. And if anybody was just to look in with some insight, they would see that behind fornication is not just the act itself, but it's the result. And the result of fornication is corrupt society. And when society is corrupt, then it can't sustain. And for that reason, Islam does not accept it. And most of the cases now, I mean, amongst the young people of the society, you see 14 and 15-year-old girls now walking around with kids, they're not even finished high school basically. And those children grow up in single houses, not knowing who their fathers are, or not having a father role model, so they turn out to be very angry and rebellious kids because they don't have role models and nobody to keep them under control, so they end up involved in a lot of crime. And as you can see, especially in our Western worlds, the crime rates of the youth is higher than ever before. And furthermore, so many transmitted diseases from illegal sex or illegal intercourse, that it has become very widespread amongst the youth. Yani transmitting these diseases have become very common amongst the youth because illegal intercourse has become the norm. So Islam has closed this door and has laid out a punishment of 100 lashes for those who carry out this act, as a means to install fear inside of the society of people, in order that the greater good come out of it. And that is the wisdom behind issuing such verdicts in Islam, in order for the greater good of society. Because if this thing is not looked at as grievous, it's going to have a serious effect, as we see taking place now, and therefore the society is no longer productive society and will be overwhelmed with corruption. So he said, was zina, and then he says, وَالنَّظْرُ إِلَى الْأَجْنَبِيَّةِ وَالتَّلَذُّذَ بِكَلَامِهَا. يعني وَالنَّظْرُ إِلَى الْأَجْنَبِيَّةِ, and that means looking at a woman who is not your mahram. That's what al-ajnabiyya means. Ajnabiyya, if we were to translate it, means foreigner. But what do we mean here by foreigner? Anybody who's not your mahram. And generally, al-mahram is 7. Generally, your mother. And when we say your mother, we say yani ummahatukum, yani your mothers and your mother's mother and your mother's mother and your mother's mother and your mother's mother, all the way ila Adam, all the way down to Adam alayhi salam. So all your mother and your mother's mothers, all the way to the end, they're considered mahram. And your daughters, number 2, and your sisters, number 3, and your aunt from your dad's side, which is 4, and your aunt from your mother's side, which is 5, and your brother's daughters, which is 6, and your sister's daughters, which is 7. Yani that's generally who your mahrams are. and mahram meaning that those are the women who you can look at freely and, for example, see them when they're not wearing hijab, and to shake their hands, and so on and so forth. But al-ajnabi is somebody who you have no rights to in terms of females, like your female cousin, or somebody who has no relation to you. This is considered al-ajnabiyya. So in terms of fiqh, when we say al-ajnabiyya, it means somebody who's not your mahram, unless the scholars mention that distinguish between, is it an ajnabiyya that is a non-believer or ajnabiyya that's a believer. But once we say al-ajnabiyya, means somebody that's not your mahram. So he said, وَالنَّظُرُ إِلَى الْأَجْنَبِيَّةِ, looking at a woman that is not your mahram, because she's al-ajnabiyya, is not permissible. So when we say that it's not permissible, meaning that's haram, what do we mean here then? That it's wajib on a man to lower his gaze. It's wajib on a man to lower his gaze. And that's the origin of the rule that's established numerous times in the Quran, that the believers should lower their gaze. Now, lowering their gaze, as you mentioned, is wajib, and it's haram not to do so, to look at a woman. But there's situations to when a man can look at a woman. For example, when a man and a woman, when a woman is brought before the qadi in order to make an oath. The qadi wants to look at her and see her and make her understand that this issue here is very important. Or she's making a statement, she's going to be a witness. The qadi has to see who she is, because she can't be a witness unknown. So the qadi must see her face in order for her to be considered a witness. Or in some of the books it mentions, for example, buying and selling, writing a contract between a buyer and a seller. For example, a person's gonna go to a shop of a person and buy something on credit, and that person's gonna sign. Between them are gonna sign a contract that if this person doesn't pay, then so and so. Then that person has a right to see the face of that person, because that is the person to whom he is doing a contract with. Or, for example, going for ID, necessary ID like birth certificates and passports. It's not tangible that a person's going that it would be acceptable for a woman to take a picture with a veil on. And that's the other extreme, to assume that you can't remove your veil to take a picture for a passport, which is considered necessity, right? And numerously mentioned in our books, continuously mentions that the awra of a woman is considered her everything except her hands and her face. So it's permissible for her to leave her hands and her face open, although the scholars stressed within the books that if there is a fear for fitna, then it's wajib on her to cover her face. And some of the scholars went into more criteria by saying that if she's beautiful, then she needs to cover her face, and then if she's not beautiful, then she doesn't need to cover her face. In reality, covering the face is preferable, and that was generally the ways and the customs of the Muslims since old times. And may Allah give us tawfiq. But as we mentioned, وَالنَّظَرُ إِلَى الْأَجْنَبِيَّةِ, although we say that the later scholars in the times mentioned that covering the face is wajib in terms of fitna, the original rule is that it's on men first to lower their gaze, because that's what is mentioned in the Quran directly in the text, to order the believers that they should lower their gaze. And in our madhab, for the woman covering the face is only under the condition of fatwa. Under the condition of fitna. But the reality is, in our times, and it's been for the last few centuries, that the Muslims are surrounded by fitna. And what do we mean by fitna here? When the morale of the Muslims go down, so that sinning and fawahish, sinning and immoral actions are widespread. And then he says, وَالتَّلَذُّذَ بِكَلَامِهَا, and to enjoy her speech. And this is very common in workplaces. For example, people that work in office places, the whole environment is very loose, and everybody in the office seems to be flirting every time they walk past somebody else's desk. So the workplace is a place where at-taladduth bi kalamiha happens, meaning to enjoy her talk, meaning to sit back and giggle and talk with another woman, be she a Muslim or not, and enjoy holding that conversation with her. And this is also very common, as I used to witness in universities. As I can remember, they call them MSAs, Muslim Student Associations. A lot of free mixing and a lot of enjoyment between male and female brothers and sisters when they are considered ajnabi, meaning that they're not considered their mahrams, and that is haram. And one has to be very careful in respect to that, because of the fact that the nafs run very high, especially between two Muslims, a Muslim sister and a Muslim brother. It's an open door for shaitan to make them slip off their religion. So a person should be aware of that. As he mentions here, وَالنَّظْرُ إِلَى الْأَجْنَبِيَّةِ, looking at somebody who's not lawful for you to look at, al-ajnabiyya, وَالتَّلَذُّذَ بِكَلَامِهَا, and enjoying her speech, are enjoying her speech, are engaging in conversation that is pleasurable, is all haram. Then he goes in to say, وَأَكْلُ أَمْوَالِ النَّاسِ بِغَيْرِ تِيبِ نَفْسٍ وَالْأَكْلُ بِالشَّفَاعَةِ أَوْ بِالدِّينِ. Al-aklu amwal al-nas means to eat somebody's money. Aklu means to eat somebody's money, which is an expression which we also use in English. He ate all my money, meaning he took all my money. So aklu amwal al-nas bighayri tibi nafs, without the consent. Bighayri tibi nafs can be translated as without the consent of a person. So taking somebody's money, whether it be a Muslim or a non-Muslim, without their consent, or without their pleasurable consent, meaning to take it by force, or to take it through trickery, or to take something through gambling, or to rob something from somebody, or to borrow money and not give it back, all of this is considered haram. And this is what we mean when we say when he says وَأَكْلُ أَمْوَالِ النَّاسِ بِغَيْرِ تِيبِ نَفْسٍ. And nafs, the word nafs here means insan, person. The nafs here, nafs doesn't mean the nafs. When we say here nafs, means insan, a person. Then he says وَأَكْلُ بِالشَّفَاعَةِ أَوْ بِالدِّينِ. Yani, in short here he mentions three things. When we say aklu amwal, meaning to take somebody's money unjustly. So akl amwal al-nas, number one, bighayri tib nafsin. That's the first one, without the consent and pleasure of that person. Number two, wal-aklu bish-shafa'ati, and meaning to take money for intercession, we can say. For example, just like what we have now in the lawyer system or the court system. For example, a person does a crime and they're known to be guilty, and maybe they're famous and rich. They get themselves a very famous lawyer who knows that they committed murder, but can present a beautiful and sophisticated lie to convince the judge that he should win the case. So the person guarantees his lawyer that if he can get him off the case, I'll pay you such and such a money. I'll pay you a certain amount of money if you can get me off this case. While the lawyer knows, and there's an agreement between them that he's guilty. So this is what we consider yani wal aklu bi shafa'ati aw bid-din, to do something or to pay somebody to get you some type of benefit. And it's also not permissible, for example, to pay somebody a piece of money, I guess you can say under the table, to get something done for you faster. For example, you know somebody that works in the place where you get your driver's license, and you know that if you go through the system, the legal system, like everybody else, is going to take you 3 months to get your license. So you call your friend and say, hey, listen, if I just pay you 120 and you can put that in your pocket, can you put my application in the front so that I can get my license faster? This is considered all haram. وهو الأكل بالشفاعة. Now that's aklu بالشفاعة. And the third, bid-din, yani with religion. And what do we mean by aklu amwal nas bid-din? For example, organizations who raise and who fundraise money and tell the people that they're fundraising for one cause, and then they take that money and they spend it in another cause, while putting a lot of it in their pocket, claiming, we're an organization that sends money overseas to help the poor, and then a good percentage of the money goes in their pockets. This is considered aklu amwal nasi bid-din, yani to use the religion as a means of taking money unjustly. A means of taking money unjustly. Same thing with shafa'ah, a means of taking money in a manner that is unjust or not legal, like as we mentioned in terms of getting a license, to cheat your way to the front of the line in order that you can get quicker service. This is all not permissible in the Sharia. And inshallah we'll stop here, and hopefully next class we'll finish this chapter and move on to the chapters of fiqh, which is the chapter of purification in terms of wudu and ghusl. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.